May I speak to you in the name of the one holy and living God. Please be seated. So this is my first time preaching on this passage, although the second time officially because I did preach at 8 o'clock also. But my first go around preaching with this passage, and I have wanted to preach on this passage for many, many years. Many of you know that I live in Napa in the heart of wine country. But maybe things that are lesser known are that I used to work in the wine industry. And even lesser known than that, because I really don't talk about it much, is that I am a certified specialist of wine. So Jesus turning water into wine, it's like one of my very favorite passages. And this is a very culturally known passage. There's a Facebook meme that goes around every so often where it's like a picture of like a Target or something where there's on the racking there's a sign that says water, but there's wine there, and the caption says Jesus was here. And I had posted that this week, and my cousin said, "I'm pretty sure that Jesus did not turn water into barefoot." Which we know is true because it says in the passage that it was better than what they had before. My friend who's a winemaker at a pretty big winery in Napa, adding water to wine is just part of the winemaking process. And he says that when he tells his crew how much water to add, instead of gallons, he tells them in JC units. So, I love all the wine jokes and the water into wine jokes, so had to get them out. But, wine in our society has gotten to be this like thing of mystique, this luxury product. I mean, especially where I live in Napa, where, you have like the Screaming Eagles and all of that, just absurdly priced wines and these rating systems with the 100 points and all that. Back in the time of Jesus, wine was a much more ordinary, everyday thing. And that's because water was often not safe to drink. It was sort of from a stagnant source. So drinking wine or beer or cider let people hydrate without getting sick. So it was a way to kind of add some purification to the water. And a fun fact about wine in this time, the winemaking's improved a lot since the first century, but they used to dilute the wine. In fact, it was considered barbaric to just drink straight wine. So there are, what I found were 3 different sources of antiquity saying how much they diluted the wine. And the one closest to the time of Jesus was Pliny the Elder, he reports that they diluted the wine with an 8-to-1 ratio, so 8 parts water and 1 part wine. So there's still a lot of water going into the wine. But I think one of the things I find most interesting about this passage is that it's with just ordinary things, like water and wine. These are ordinary, everyday things that Jesus is using for a miracle. And the other thing is that they had run out of wine. There was a scarcity of wine. And what Jesus does is takes us from scarcity into abundance. There was no wine, and then suddenly there's 6 jugs with 20 to 30 gallons. I did not do the math on that, but somebody could probably tell us how many gallons of wine that is. But it was a lot of wine, maybe even more than what the wedding party would have used. And we know that the wine was really good because there's the whole thing about, usually you wait till everybody's drunk, then you get out the less good stuff. But you did that in reverse. You brought us the good stuff after everybody was already drunk, apparently. But there's this abundance in the story. And we know that this is Jesus's and John, his first public act. And this is the act that made him known, that made the disciples really recognize who this is, this turning something scarce into abundance. And, when we think about stories of everyday things, that we go from scarcity and abundance. I can think of a few stories just from modern times where people in partnership with God have used everyday things to help move us from scarcity into abundance. We think of buses and public transportation probably as a pretty ordinary everyday thing. Probably most of us don't even really ride a bus or public transportation very much. But in 1950s Montgomery, Alabama, something extraordinary happened with those ordinary buses. And we moved from scarcity into abundance because of the Montgomery bus boycotts. So that was the time of segregation in the South, where Black people were only allowed to sit on certain parts of the bus, only allowed to use this water fountain, not that one, this bathroom, not that one. And society, that there weren't a mixing of the two races. And that not only created a scarcity for Black people who were living in an oppressive system, who did not have the same opportunities as white people, it also created a scarcity for white people of not having the richness of all of their brothers and sisters in humanity with them. When we are oppressing one group over another, the oppressors also are losing something. So the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in this Montgomery bus boycott brought people together, and we know that work to that and a few other things helped to end segregation in the South. And they did that by using an ordinary thing. There was no extraordinary moment of some complete miraculous thing that happened to end segregation. It was just using ordinary things and then moving us from scarcity into abundance. And because of the Montgomery bus boycott, the world became to know Martin Luther King Jr. And he went on to do many other amazing things in his life. Housing is another thing that is fairly ordinary. I think everyone here lives in some kind of a dwelling with 4 walls and a roof or a ceiling. In California, because we have scarcity of housing, it's maybe more extraordinary than housing is in, say, Ohio. But we know for some people, housing is scarce. And we know that there are people who really struggle to afford housing. Habitat for Humanity was founded in Americus, Georgia in 1976. And I don't know how well known they were between 1976 and 1984. But in 1984, former President Jimmy Carter, who'd been living in New York at the time and I presume was kind of thinking about what he wanted to do with the rest of his life, was running in New York City and ran past a Habitat for Humanity bill. And he thought, Rosalind and I should volunteer and do one of those builds. And that's how he got involved with Habitat for Humanity. And because of Jimmy Carter's involvement with Habitat, that became well known. And they were able to do more work and create more abundance in housing. And were able to give people the dignity of being able to afford their own homes. And there's something that I see that Martin Luther King Jr. and Jimmy Carter have in common, other than that they are from my home state of Georgia, and other than they are both Baptists. But these are two people who are steeped in the knowledge of God's abundant love for them. They know that, like that wine that Jesus made, that God's love for us just overflows. There's more of it than we can even imagine. There's more love for us than we even know what to do with. And they were able to do these big acts, moving our world from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance. These miracles with ordinary things, they were able to do that because they knew first that they are deeply loved by God. And then they were able to show the rest of us what God's love looks like in action, what that abundance of love, what it looks like, what it can do, how it can change the world. So there are a few things that I want you to wonder about this week. I want you to look around, and I want you to wonder and ask, where do you see God's abundant love for you in ordinary ways, in ordinary things? I want you to wonder about where you have been moved from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance, from that place of there not being enough to the place where it's overflowing. And then I want you to think about how you, in your ordinary life, with your ordinary things, how you can show God's love to the world. How you can show the world that God's love is extraordinary and that God's love for all of us is overflowing.